Hello, welcome to Algebra 2 CST release question number 63. It says if the equation y equals 2 to the x power is graphed, which of the following values of x would produce a point closest to the x-axis? So it's talking about graphing here. I'm going to include a grid then, and that'll help us draw a nice graph. But let me get out more of a gray color for that so it's a little easier to see. Alright, so I'm going to put this off to the side over here. We'll do an XY table right here. We're going to do a little bit more than is really necessary to solve the problem here, because I want you to have an understanding, a more full or more complete understanding of the problem. So let's draw a graph here. I know that I'm not going to have any negative values. I've had enough experience myself as a math teacher to know that with an equation like this, I'm not going to have negative values. So I'm not going to draw much going down this way. So exponential was, as I go more and more positive, it's going to get bigger and bigger more quickly. As I go more and more negative, it's going to get closer and closer to 0 without actually touching it. And so this is going to be my x-axis, my y-axis. Let's plug in some values. So the y equals 2 to the x power. Looks like a squiggly equal sign. Didn't mean to have it look like that. There we go. It's not approximately, it equals that exactly. If I plug in, let's start with 0. So y equals 2 to the 0 power. 2 to the 0 power is going to be 1. So I know I have a point right here. You can assume that each one of these is going to be just 1. So this is just 1, 2, 3. I'm not going to draw that in there. We can just make that assumption. We'll agree to that. X as 1, 2 to the first power would be 2. If I plugged in 2, 2 to the second power would be 4. If I plugged in 3, 2 to the third power would be 8. So here's some more points we can plot. I know that 1, 2 would be on the graph. I know that 2, 4 would be on the graph. And I know that 3, 8 would be on the graph. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 3, 8. And so notice this is getting bigger and bigger more quickly. That's an exponential function. That's what happens with exponential functions. Things start to get bigger rapidly as you move in the positive direction, at least for an equation like this, where the power and the number there are both positive. So let's go backwards now. Let's start doing a couple points going the other direction, and then we'll talk about these particular points here. So -1, that'd be like 2. This would equal 2 to the -1, which would be the same thing. You can think of this as over 1. Be like 1 over 2 to the +1, which would equal 1/2. Likewise, 2 to the -2 would be 1 over 2 to the +2, which would be 1/4, and so on. And so again, just trying to give you a more complete understanding of this problem, doing a little bit more than I have to here to actually solve the problem. But you may have to do something different than what's here on your particular test. So this allows us to see clearly what the graph will look like in the positive direction and the negative direction as we continue. This wouldn't actually ever touch the x-axis, but it would get infinitely close to it. And so now let's figure out what's what here. Which one of these would produce a point closest to the x-axis? Plugging in 1/4. Well, 1/4, that's about, or it is, 0.25. 3/4 is 0.75. 5/3, that's about 1.6, or it's 1.6 repeating. And 8/3, 3 goes into 8 2 whole times, you'd have 2/3 left over. That's 0.6 repeating again. This was just 3 into 5 one whole time with 2/3 left over. That's where I got these values from. And so notice as I go out, 1/4, that'd be right about here, 0.25. That's going to be right about here. As I go out 3/4, that's going to be a point right about here. I don't know exactly what it is. I'd have to plug that value in and work that out, but it's not really necessary. Notice right here that this particular value is going to be closest. This was the x value of 1/4, or 0.25. So which one's going to be closest? Clearly this one I think or I think it is clear that it's going to be that one. So 1.6 repeating, 1 and 2/3, you're going to have a point there-ish, and then 2.6, you're getting out there even more now. You're going to have a point something like that. Which one's closest to the x-axis right here? clearly this value, 0.25 or 1/4, will give you will produce a point closest to the x-axis. So number 63, choice A.